I'm Dave Butler. It's 2017. Let's look at cash in Novo Nordisk. We'll jump right to the financial statements, which start on page 58. Our balance sheet on page 59 shows us cash at bank numbers and also marketable securities numbers for December 31, 2016 and December 31, 2015. We want to add these two together to get a sense of how much liquidity a company really has, and when we do that, we see virtually no change year over year. A small increase from 20,465,000,000 Danish kroner in 2015 to 20,699,000,000 Danish kroner in 2016. Novo Nordisk continues to hold about the same size pile of cash. When we look at the statement of cash flows on page 60, we see something more eye-catching. Our cash flows, that's net cash generated from operating activities, rose from 38.3 to 48.3 billion Danish kroner. These operating cash flows are calculated using the indirect method, which can get confusing. But as I look at this section of the cash flow statement, I notice two things. One, our profit rose, and that contributed to our generating more cash. Let's make a mental note to look at that when we get to the profit discussion. Two, you'll see a big difference in the income taxes paid line. That shows the actual cash we paid during the year in taxes, and you see a serious drop. When I search in the annual report for the word tax to find an explanation, I find two relevant notes. On page 6, we read, "The free cash flow exceeded the outlook provided in February 2016, explained by a positive effect from settlement of tax cases related to prior years." On page 73, this chart entitled "Income Taxes Paid" shows that we were repaid over 5 billion Danish kroner relating to prior years. So we settled some tax cases and we got our cash back. That's interesting, but probably one-off, although depending on who I was talking to at Novo Nordisk, say, if I were meeting with someone in finance or especially tax, I might have a talking point here. I could ask whether there were more such cases outstanding or express curiosity for details. At the bottom of the same chart on page 73, we see the 2,899,000,000 Danish kroner, which is the same number that appears on the statement of cash flows on page 60, so those two charts line up. What did Novo Nordisk do with this cash? In the investing activities section of the statement of cash flows, we see that our purchases of intangible assets, that's intellectual property, was basically consistent year over year. Our purchase of property, plant, and equipment, that's CapEx, buildings and tools in other words, spiked from 5.2 billion to 7.1 billion Danish kroner. What happened? When I search for the word capital in the annual report, I read on page 10 that net capital expenditures was primarily related to investments in a new production facility for a range of diabetes active pharmaceutical ingredients, a new diabetes care filling capacity, and an expansion of the manufacturing capacity for biopharmaceutical products. Searching for the word facility, I further read on page 35 that the new production facility is in Clayton, North Carolina. So here's a second thing I might discuss with a Novo Nordisk contact. Your capital expenditures have spiked in 2016, in part because you're building this new facility in Clayton. If that means that internally there's increased pressure to generate more cash, I know that my contact's options are to increase the company's profit, manage its working capital, and manage its buildings and tools. What can I do to help pull on those levers? Consistent with past performance, we also see on the statement of cash flows that Novo Nordisk has returned large amounts of cash to its public shareholders in the form of stock buybacks, which tend to drive up stock price, and cash dividends. Speaking of dividends, that 23.8 billion Danish kroner looks almost twice as big as last year. What gives? I search for the word dividend in the report, and I find this chart on page 15 called Cash Distribution to Shareholders. It shows that in 2016, Novo Nordisk paid a special interim dividend. On page 45, we read that the company expects to distribute an interim dividend in August 2017 as well. So there's something else I might ask Novo Nordisk contact. Do we think interim dividends will be the ordinary practice going forward? If so, does that put more pressure on my contact to generate cash, and how can I help? I'd like to know about Novo Nordisk's cost of capital, but my reading through the annual report only turns up one reference, and we'll get back to that when we cover assets.